Yeah, I'd like to speak about Fridolin HAMMA. He was born in 1818. He passed away in 1892. In 1864, he began his violin shop and bought 8,000 violins in the next 20 years. Pretty extraordinary feat. In 1840, he was an organ choir master in Schaffhausen. In 1842, he was a city organist in Meersburg. He discovered the origin of the French national anthem, the Marseillaise, in the Credo of the Mass by Holtzmann, which induced a flood of opinions and reactions. In 1848, he took part in the Battle of Naples during the Italian Revolution. So he was 30 years old, and he was in Naples. He probably got to visit the Galliano family workshop, possibly the Gennaro Fabbricatore guitar workshop as well. In 1848, he published a German National March. It was published by Heckel in Mannheim, Germany. In 1849, a year later, after he had been in Naples, he was involved in some uprisings in Baden, after which he had to flee to Switzerland till he got amnesty and could return to Baden. In 1850, he was a professor in Canton Gesangschule in Bergdorf, Ghent, Belgium. He was an organist in Ettlingen near Karlsruhe on the German-French border. Around 1850, he was also a teacher of piano and singing in Neustadt am Harz, director of music school in Neustadt. But in 1864, he founded HAMMA and Company, violin maker and dealer in Stuttgart. I found two ads from 1876 and 1877 on Google options. He had a shop called Central Musik Magazine in Stuttgart, magazine being French for store. This is what I call a circa 1878 Fridolin HAMMA and Company catalog. It has numerical listings from about 2,679 up to 4,973, more or less. And it shows how many instruments he had sold already. He sold his first 2,500 by 1878. Since he got up to 8,000 instruments in 1885, I kind of figure he got 3,000 instruments into his hands from 1878 to 1885. These are just speculative numbers. But I tell you, I've done a lot of research on illiteracy, and at the time he was acquiring all these violins, he had already been in Italy for his first time in 1848 at the age of 30 in Naples. At that time, northern Italy had 75% illiteracy rates. Illiteracy created a situation of poverty, and those that were wealthy were doing fine. But the emigration of Italians towards the end of the 19th century, hundreds of thousands of them would go for 6 months to Argentina. They were called Las Golondrinas. The birds that would come and do the harvest in the grain fields of Argentina. So my contention is that he used his fluency in whatever Italian he had developed from spending the time there. But if people are illiterate, they can't even read a violin label. So he had to just walk around and say, voglio comprare un violino. I want to buy a violin. So people would offer him violins, and if he could read the labels, didn't matter what price they were asking as long as he had money. So he acquired 8,000 violins. I learned this from Daniel Schoenbaum's book, The Violin, A Social History. And it created quite an inquisitiveness in my mind. I'm a guitar historian scholar for about 25 years or so now. But this is my first video on Italian violin acquisitions. If we look at the pages of the 1878 catalog, we can see page 1. I'll show it to you here. Shows there are 3 Stradivari violins and 2 Del Gesso violins. Those are numbered 3355, 4307, 4123, 4953, 3288. So all the lower numbers, those are instruments that he had sold already. 18,000 Deutschmarks would be about $4,500 American. And he had another Strad, that was a 1700 Strad. He had a 1691 Strad. This would be at the beginning of the long Strad. These were 16,000 marks, so that would be $4,000 American. He had a Del Gesso from 1740, 3 years before he passed away. This was made, and it had a price of 15,000 Deutschmarks, which would be about $3,750 in US dollars. He had a 1737 Strad, made the last year that Antonio was still working. He was 92 years old at the time. And this one was priced at 12,000 Deutschmarks, or 3,000 US dollars. He had a 1728 Del Gesso, Joseph Bonetius Del Gesso, made in Cremona as well. It was priced at 10,000 Deutschmarks, or $2,500. So this is the first page 5, and this catalog goes up to 55 pages. It includes 3 pages of cellos for almost a couple dozen cellos. He had a couple pages of violas, and let's say 40 pages of violins. And he would show the backs of these instruments, sometimes the front. The backs being the most important part. It was the part of the violin that got the least wear. The tops, due to bowing, gunk coming out of people's mouths, etc., would get the most damage. The back of the headstock would get wear, flattened out due to the being put down on a table, being put in a slide-in case in the early days of cases that were made, except for the most exquisite cases that would have a top opening with a lock. So we see those prices. Here's a circa 1905 HAMMA and Company catalog. They were located at Searstrasse 8, which you can see on Google Maps, but you see the new building because it was a devastated city in World War II. And so we see a Stradivari at 18,000 Deutschmarks in roughly 1878, but here we see by about 1905 a 1702 Strad, 65,000 Deutschmarks. Deutschmark was worth 25 cents, And it was like that all the way till about the mid-teens. After World War II, it got up to about 57 to the dollar. But it was still 4.1 to the dollar, 1913, 1914. And so this would be an enormous amount of money, $15,000. And so at this time, the HAMMA and Company shop had 5 Stradivari violins. The least expensive one, 1698, was 27,000 Deutschmarks, or about 9,000. No, excuse me, about 6,500 U.S. dollars. Here's a Joseph Guinerius del Jesus, 1737, at 25,000 Deutschmarks, $6,250. And we have a 1729 at 40,000 or $10,000. Yesterday I acquired this circa 1910 catalog. And this shows a 1710 Volpamp owned Strad for 40,000 Deutschmarks, $10,000. This catalog was printed by A. Bruckmann in München, in Munich. Gold print, almost looks like, what do we call it? Silk screen on top of the brown border. Green paper inside out. Interesting. The inside back page is cellos. Not even a separate page itself. Thank you for listening. I am really a fan of literacy. I speak 4 languages: Spanish, Japanese, English, and Mandarin. A little bit of Mandarin. But I have translated Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, Catalan dialect of Barcelona, very little German, and Japanese and Chinese in my life. Reading is so important. During the American Civil War, I learned this just a few weeks ago, 90% of the people in New England could read because they felt it so important to do so that one could read the Bible. The British troops at the time they were fighting the American colonists during the American Revolution were 20% illiterate during the time of Napoleon as well. When British troops were involved in the Battle of the Somme and 59,000 troops were killed in a single day, 1 out of every 10 of those British soldiers was illiterate.